Hello and welcome to the shed. In today's video we're going to have a quick little build video. We're going to be building a leather strop today. Hope you enjoy. So although you can go out and buy leather strops for Handtool woodworking on some sort of a base like this piece of MDF, most of them are way too narrow for your wider hand plane blades, like from a number 8 like this one here that's I think about 66 millimeters wide, or 2 5/8 of an inch, something like that. And so most of them I find, or that I've seen online, are 30, 40, 50 bucks here in Australia, and they're only about 30 millimeters wide, which is fairly wide enough for a wide chisel like this Japanese one here. So what I thought we'd do is, I'll show you a few different options here. We'll go ahead, we'll make a leather strop so you can save some money and get a decent quality strop for yourself. So first of all, for making the strop, you want some sort of a solid substrate. I find that MDF works well, and the strop that I did have previously, which is why I'm actually making this video, is that I misplaced it and I like to have a loose strop around. Probably knocked it off into the bin or something at some point, which just goes to show you got to keep more attention to what you're actually doing. So this is 19mm MDF. Let me get you a quick measurement. I like them to be nice and wide, and this one's slightly wider than the one that I had before. This is about 83 millimeters wide by 275 mil long. Now, yes, that does seem a little large, but I find that it's actually better to have it larger than smaller, just because it's much easier and you don't have to worry about landing right in the middle of your strop every time. Now, when it comes to the leather, I'm going to be using this tooling leather that I've got here, because if you look up over here, I've made a few different tool sheaths and stuff for some of my tools up on the wall there, and so that's why I have this larger piece of leather. Now, this is just from a local leather shop here in Perth. This is actually just an offcut. You can see that it's got blemishes and things from the brandings, and it's just not perfect. So there's more branding marks here. So this is just an offcut. This is a slightly larger offcut. Some leather places I have heard others mention that you can go in there and you might just have an offcuts bin that you can pay a few dollars for bits of leather, or maybe pick some up cheap. But if not, I have got pieces like this previously that were maybe about 30 centimeters by 30 centimeters for, I think it was about 30 bucks. So you could get a lot of strops out of something like that. If you don't want to fork out, you can sometimes just get these smaller, thinner pieces of craft leather, and they're not going to work quite as well as the thicker stuff, and that's why I like using the thicker leather, just because it's got a much better substrate for holding onto any honing compound that you want to use, and I find it just stands up to the punishment a little better. You accidentally scrag your chisel or something on there and you dig into it, you're not going to destroy it, and you can just keep using it because it's very thick. It sort of just pushes itself back together. You do that with these smaller ones and you're going to be left with a gap that'll probably open up. So there is that. Now, when it comes to things like hook knives like these, which are curved, and the insides of your carving chisels and things like that, with the substrate you can put angles on here, and so you'd have a larger one and a smaller circle, so you could actually use it for instance to sort of get inside like that, and it'd be circular in shape. Now, if you're going to do one like that, you can't use this thicker tooling leather. It won't work for that, and that's where something like this thinner stuff will come in. Now, if you have an old leather couch, as long as it's actually leather and not faux leather, because I've tried the faux leather in this thinner stuff before and it just doesn't last and doesn't work very well. So genuine leather, if you've got an old couch that's still got some good leather, you can cut that off, and the surface of the smooth side doesn't matter as much, although we will talk about that in a minute. It's the rough side, especially if you're going to be using honing compound, that you want. So as long as the back side is or the smooth side's in good enough condition for you to be able to stick it down, it will work. So if you are using it with these shaping ones, you'd obviously stretch it over the outside and attach it, and that's how you'd use it. Now, my solution is to have a flat strop, and for anything like curved chisels or knives, crook knives, any of that, is that I'll have a piece of thin leather like I have here just over a dowel, and I've just done few little bits of basic hand stitching along the back there to hold that on there. It does slide on and off, so you can replace it, and you put honing compound on that, and you can use them to get on the inside of anything. And so that's another solution, which is the solution that I think is best, is having two separate strops for this, because most of the time our strop's going to be for our chisels and our plane blades. First thing I'll note here is that I do now have one of these cutting boards, the regenerative ones. I use this now when I'm cutting things most of the time, so I don't dig into my workbench, because, well, it's better not to dig into your workbench and wreck the surface. So when it comes to leather, when you've got a larger piece like this, you want to try and work out how you can use the least, or waste the least amount of leather. So you can see here that I've cut something out of here in the past, so I'm going to come right up against that. So I'm going to use that as the edge on my block here, and sometimes you can just draw lines. If you're doing something more complicated, like for an axe sheath, you'll have a template and stuff. It's just a lot easier to do that. With something as simple as a basic square like this, you want to make sure you're putting the face side down, because obviously that's where it's going to stick. And this flat side is going to go up against the strop for this particular style of strop. So now that I've done that, I'm going to come in with my nice sharp knife, put some pressure down so it doesn't move, and we're going to cut this out. Now I can use my marking knife for this, it's sharp enough. You might want to use a box cutter or something like that if it's not sharp enough, or you do have specialist leather knives, which for us being woodworkers, we're not going to use specialist knives. So you can see here I still haven't quite cut through because this is quite thick leather, so I'm just going to run through those cuts until it's come free. So now I'm going to get that out of the way. I know I still have one last cut on this side here to sort out. So we're going to line that up there, cut that off too. Now we've got our leather piece ready, let's just talk about the substrate that I'm using here. I know I mentioned before that I'm going to be using MDF. That's what I used in the past, and I think works very well because it's stable, won't move, moisture doesn't really affect it in terms of humidity, and if it was an issue you could go ahead and seal it, but I haven't had a problem in the past and I find that it actually just stays stable. Other options you might be able to use is melamine. I'm not so sure that is the best necessarily, but if you've got it, it's nice and stable. The only problem might be adhering the leather to it, and I'm not sure whether if you rough it up it would, but I've never used it. I've just used MDF because it just works so well for me. The other option is some stable hardwood. If you had some that's in your shop for a while, it's probably not going to move, and then obviously even plywood is another option. But I think with the hardwood and the plywood, because I have had plywood warp on me in the past, is that you might want to seal that base with something like a shellac or something just to stop moisture getting in and out of it, and then you should be good there, because ideally the substrate is there for you to clamp it down in places, but also to keep it pretty flat, which means it's not going to throw your chisels and plane blades out when you stop them across the surface. So that's the options there. In terms of attaching the leather to the substrate and which side of the leather we use, the rough side is good to have up most of the time, and that's what I do with nearly all my strops, because if you're going to put honing compound on it, that rough side is going to hold the honing compound and do a very good job at holding that honing compound on there for you, which is what you want. That's why that's a good idea. Now you could go ahead and double side a strop like this, put another piece on the other side, and you could have a rough side on one side and then a smooth piece of leather, the smooth side, because you're going to have a rougher grit on that rough side of the leather and a much smoother sort of grit and polish on the smooth side. I've heard people mention that before, but I've tried both and I haven't seen a difference. So yeah, do what you want there, but I suggest putting the rough side out and using honing compound on your strop, or no honing compound. I've used strops with honing compound and without, and I've mentioned videos in the past that I don't tend to use it, but I have started using it a little bit more recently. So let's go ahead and attach this. I'm going to be using double-sided tape, so I have this thin, it's not mounting tape, you don't want the stuff with the foam on it. This is a very thin sort of sellotapey, less than a millimeter, less than like a quarter of a millimeter thick. It's very thin stuff, and this particular one holds really well, so that's why I'm going to use it. The other option is some sort of contact adhesive or cement that you could use, or any glue really that's going to hold it on there. But double-sided tape works well, and means you can remove it and replace that piece of leather if you want to in the future, although it's probably not necessarily, especially if you're using this thicker leather. So this is a very easy, simple process. Always give it a nice push down because you really want that to stick. And now let me show you this in a second. So you can see I've got a gap here. Now when using this thicker leather, that's no problem. That's going to hold on there. You don't actually have to stick every little tiny bit of that. But if you're using thinner stuff, like this sort of stuff, I'd suggest that you actually cover the entire block and really get it to stick down part by part across the whole thing, because this will move. And I have experienced that in the past. This is just standard double-sided tape, so we'll get under that covering and lift it off. And this is why I like to use it. It's very quick, easy, no glue. It's just simple. So with this thick stuff, you don't really have to worry about how you put it on the surface. Kind of just roughly line it up and push it down. Now, since this is double-sided tape and it activates under pressure, let's jump down here to the vise and we'll squeeze it in the vise, and that's going to lock it into place. And I never really have these sort of things come apart. I've used double-sided tape on blocks of pine before that I squeezed together, and I struggled to get them back apart. So that's how I know this double-sided tape works well, and that's why I use it. When it comes to this, I just put it right in the middle where I'm going to get the tightest clamping. Do it up until I can't move it. Flip it over the other way, do the same. So now that that's attached, if there's any little bits that are overhanging, it's a good idea just to shave them back flush, because you don't want them to catch and try and pull it off, because sometimes if they do catch, they can pull them off. So let's just quickly clean that up. So now we've made a leather strop. And it was nice, quick, easy, simple, and in my opinion, much cheaper and better than what you're going to buy at a store, because you can build it to the width that you want. Although there is the cost of the leather, a lot of these strops are expensive that you're going to buy, and there are some options out there that are a bit cheaper. Now, the other thing you can do, if you can't find some cheap leather, you can't get a hold of some cheap leather, I'll leave the video down below where I made essentially the poor man's strop, which is just actually the other side of this blank that I got here, which is why I'm using it, is you just add honing compound straight to your MDF or your plywood, and you can actually strop directly on that, and it does an adequate job when you're first starting. And that's what I did when I first started. I just had a piece of MDF, and so eventually when you upgrade to the leather, you're going to find that a lot better. But I did think that I'd just mention that you can actually just use the back of the MDF or the plywood with your honing compound to get started. I usually hold a strop like this in my face vise for safety, especially when I'm stropping a chisel or a hand plane blade really quickly, about 50 times. It's just best when it's held in place so it doesn't slide and move and cause a danger to you. So let's jump down to the vise here and we'll give a quick demo of how this works with some honing compound. So we're going to rub our honing compound on like this. You want to get a good covering across all of the leather this very first time, because you're not going to have to reapply this often. So a good slathering on here first up is going to last you quite a long time. So you don't need to go and get a big block like this. I got this because it was cheaper than the little tiny blocks. See, most of the honing compound for tools is using an aluminium oxide honing compound, which is what this is. It's what gives it its green colour a lot of the time. A lot of what you'll buy are these little tiny blocks that are 20 bucks, 30 bucks, depending on where you are, and they do last a long time, but Big Box Store has this Josco brand which is designed for the polishing wheels, and I've had good luck and used the green one for that, and you can see it was this high to start with on this side, so yeah, I've had it for years and only used a small amount. So these are really good value, probably last you a lifetime almost, so definitely an option for you. If we have a look at this chisel here, we can see, and this is actually a factory, I've not used this chisel before. So this is how it came from the factory. You can see that it's got some marks there, it's not 100% shiny, so let's go ahead and we'll do 50 pulls on this. So you can see that, well, I hope you can see, it's a lot more shiny than it actually was. And if we look here, we can see that we've removed material, and that honing compound has definitely removed the material because we've got that sort of black steel look left on our honing compound. That's how we know it's operating and working well. And just so you got some idea of how sharp this got, it just honed up the edge that was left from the factory on this. And it's not 100% perfect because ideally it needs to go on some sharpening stones, but you can see that it's slicing this pine off nice and smoothly, and even on the end grain we can get some nice smooth shavings there. So there you have it, folks. That's how you build what I consider a woodworking or hand tool woodworking strop. It's a nice large size and just is kind of jumbo size compared to most of them that you see on the market. I've not seen any that are really this wide anywhere. So if you have, do leave the names of them down below, and maybe even put the link, and I'll verify the link there. It won't show up straight away, but if you have got some links to some of this, do leave them in the comments and I'll try and verify those links for you. And if you'd like to see another great build video such as one you've seen here today, do check out the video up here where we build this panel gauge from the Euclid's Door book. Bye for now.